Hi, my name is Rachel Overvoll. I am the author of the best-selling memoir, Finding Feminism, and today I'm going to read a piece of my book for you all. Early on the morning of January 27th, 2017, I marched in the first Women's March after President Trump was elected. The morning was chilly, so I wore a gray puffy coat over my nasty woman shirt, refusing to zip up my coat so I could proudly display the message on my t-shirt. Because of the surprising amount of traffic the march brought to Denver that morning, my friend Stephanie was over an hour late meeting me downtown. I waited for her outside the light rail stop. I will never forget sitting outside that entire hour, watching in awe as parents, children, men, women, old and young, piled into the streets with their signs and pink pussy hats. I watched them with envy, as mothers brought their daughters and fathers gladly accompanied their wives and children. I felt envious because I wished that I had had this experience as a child, because I knew this powerful movement was something I would never experience with my mom and her dad, who had told me earlier in the week that all of the reasons this march was promoting went against the will of God. Then, all of a sudden, a feeling of gratitude completely filled me and drowned out all my envy. The quiet inner voice of my heart reminded me all that I had overcome to participate in this historic day. The misogynistic, oppressive religion I had left, my relationship with John, my church community. As I stared at the people passing by, soft tears of hope fell down my cheeks. I remember being 14 years old and sitting at the kitchen table at my aunt and uncle's house, the kids' table, as Sarah, my sister, and I would call it. We were lucky enough to have a white Christmas that year, and the pure snow powder shone bright outside the large kitchen windows. As Sarah and I sat at the kids' table with our cousin Greg, we all impatiently waited for the adults to leave the kitchen so the kids could change the kitchen TV from Fox News to A Christmas Story. My parents and my aunt and uncle were gathered around the TV, watching as the Fox News reporter detailed the evils of the uprising feminist movement and the ways everyone could protect their children from this activism, which was sure to damage them. Sarah and I were somewhat paying attention to the news, as much as two young girls can to the news on Christmas, but mostly we were shoving Norwegian pancakes in our mouth, betting who could eat the most before we made ourselves sick. I remember watching Sarah finish her third or fourth pancake when, from behind us, my uncle said, "Girls." We turned to face him. He looked at us with a serious expression, gazing through his large, wire-rimmed glasses at us. "Please promise me one thing. Promise me that no matter what, you will never become feminists." As I sat in downtown Denver that day and thought about my uncle's request, a woman in her early 60s came up to me and tapped my shoulder. She had a pink pussycat hat that her light gray hair curled out from under. "It's powerful, isn't it?" she said, removing the knit pink gloves and handing me a small tissue from my tears. I took the tissue and wiped my cheeks. "Yes, it really is. I didn't know I would feel this overwhelmed." "In a good way," I said. She smiled. "This your first march?" I looked at her and nodded. "Well, you can't march without a sign." She handed me a large blank white poster which had been hiding behind her pile of pre-made signs. Then she handed me a black marker. "Here you go, honey. Now what you gonna write?" I looked at her and smiled before I bent on the sidewalk and wrote, "Proud feminist and nasty woman." I beamed as I handed her back the marker. "Thank you," I said. She gave me a quick hug before walking down the street and disappearing into the crowd of the march. Stephanie met me shortly after my encounter with this woman. We hugged and began our walk a few blocks down to the start of the march. For the next 2 hours, we marched a little over a mile. The streets were overflowing with thousands more participants than expected, causing the march path throughout downtown Denver to move at a snail's pace, but neither of us noticed. Although Stephanie and I usually talked to each other loudly for hours on end, we both marched those entire 2 hours with silence between us. I'm not sure why she didn't say anything, but I was quietly experiencing a flood of emotions. The power and magnitude of the energy that morning felt breathtaking. Step by step, I remembered the moments that flooded my entire being, not just my mind, causing me goosebumps and tears. I thought of my old lime green and blue room in Albany, Georgia. I thought of that little red book, my instructions for living as a godly woman that my mother gave to me as a child. I also remembered the first time I read The Purity Myth and the dozens of other feminist literature that opened my eyes to female freedom. I thought back to Linda, the church member my parents forced me to talk to, and the complete shame I felt when she had convinced me I had experienced an unholy orgasm. I remembered the abuse and manipulation I had endured for years at the hands of John. I thought of John's engagement to me on that beach in Michigan, and when after our breakup, how I thought I would never feel that love for someone again. Then I thought of my first year living in Denver. I remembered the rape I had experienced at the hands of Adam, and I recalled the complete love I felt for my body when I learned how to pleasure myself. Memory by memory, I relived my history, my life. I felt the ache from these memories, but the pain was quickly overcome by the confidence I felt as I reminded myself of all the ways I had overcome my experiences. Of all the times my voice was silenced, then of all the times my voice had been able to scream. I marched with hope and I shouted with power as I remembered all I had overcome to stand there proudly and to be okay. 7 years earlier in 2001, when I had left John and subsequently left the church, there were a lot of things I still didn't understand about my past. I just knew I needed to follow the small voice of survival living inside of me, telling me to leave. Looking back now, I realize I didn't understand the power that the indoctrination of the church held over me and my life. That the shame and guilt I felt for my body and my sexuality controlled my every thought and action and was not normal or healthy. I didn't understand that in leaving John, I left an abusive relationship, or even that there were other forms of abuse outside of physical abuse. I didn't know how alone I would feel after leaving the church, how in quitting the church, I walked away from the only community I had known for my entire life. I didn't understand how awkward and scared I would feel as I began navigating my life to find new communities, new places to belong to and be supported. But I think that out of all the things I didn't know, I didn't fully realize the peace and freedom I would find by leaving. For most of my life, I had been taught that freedom and peace could only be found in God's will or God's perfect plan. When I left John and the church, I thought I would never find peace or freedom because I was not living in God's will, a chilling realization to accept at the young age of 20. I just believed I would always feel empty. I would never be whole or fulfilled outside of God. But even in this dismal new system of belief, something inside me, a small inner voice of survival, saved my life. As humans, our transformations are not always immediate and at top speed. Many times, personal revisions take years. Sometimes it takes small, minute choices or decisions, all based on what you want. Then one day you realize you're no longer the same person as when you arrived. You realize that pieces of you that were once locked shut are now wide open. It is at this moment you can look back on your journey with pride. You realize that you survived the moments that you never thought you could, and you realize that you can do it again. Leaving fundamentalist Christianity did not happen overnight. I did not wake up one morning and say I'm done with religion. Leaving the church and unlearning the indoctrination the church instilled in me took several years. It took thousands of small decisions, small daily mindset shifts from my once held patriarchal beliefs about my body, my worth, and my voice. Through these small decisions and mindset shifts, I slowly found myself. I found a vulnerability and independence. I found my own voice. I found feminism. Thank you guys for letting me read to you today. I'm thinking of you as all of this scary and darkness is happening in our world, and I hope that this brought some light into your day today. Bye.